Hello everyone then, and welcome to this webinar. I'm Francis Seeley from Enfield Voices and Global Net 21, and we do a lot of webinars on a whole series of different subjects. But in the last week, we decided to do two on what's been a very, bitter and angry dispute that's developed across London. And it's a dispute around the low traffic neighbourhoods. COVID-19 has meant the government has released money to local authorities so that they could have extra low traffic neighbourhoods. And I think something like 160 will actually be or are being implemented across London. And this has created a lot of concern and a lot of anger as well, and a lot of upset. And what we're trying to do is show the case for both sides, those who have doubts about low traffic neighbourhoods, which we did last week, and those who support low traffic neighbourhoods, which we're doing today, so that we can have a polite conversation about this. And today we've got helping us Jeremy Hay Campbell, who's from the Fox Lane low traffic neighbourhood, and he supports the trial and the pilots that are going on. We've got Viola Ronboom and Fiona Deere, who are Bowes residents, and they're member of Healthy Streets and Bounds Green. And we've also got Claire Rogers, of course. Claire is one of the people who's probably been most instrumental in, developing ideas around better streets, quieter streets, and we're pleased that all four of them could come on today. So let me start with you, Claire. I mean, you have been involved in a campaign for better streets for such a long time. You've been sort of focal point in all of this. You've not just been concerned with low traffic neighbourhoods, you've been concerned with cycling. You've even been concerned in training children in cycling. And I think lots of people respect and admire you for what you do. What has led you to have this passion for this particular issue?
I admit it is a bit of an obsession. But about 7 or 8 years ago, it began to be an interest. I think what it was, I just began to wake up to the problems, really, of traffic, so much traffic on our streets, dominating our streets. And what really got to me is the fact that children can't travel independently anymore in the way that I could, growing up in 1970s. And then air pollution, obviously, was a big concern. And I just got to the point where I didn't want to be part of the problem anymore. So I had sort of overnight decision to stop driving my kids to school, to cut right back on all my short car journeys, and I, as much as possible, use public transport. I bought a tandem, which is a great fun way of getting to school. And what I discovered was that even if you're really, really determined not to use a car, everything works against you. And I realised that the design of our streets just makes walking and cycling unappealing and downright dangerous in some places because of rat running, because of lack of space for cycling. And I realised, it's not surprising, this stat we've been hearing, that 35% of London car trips are less than 2 kilometres. And it's not because people are lazy or selfish, it's because the way our roads are designed kind of force us into our cars. And, this is the problem behind the air pollution, the climate crisis. 39% of climate emissions are from roads. The inactivity, health crisis, all of this stuff is because of the design of our streets. So, cut long story short, 5 years ago, I helped to found Better Streets for Enfield, and that's all about calling for people-friendly streets. Okay,
so let me ask you, when the idea of low traffic neighbourhoods came along, and especially the present round of funding, did you think, this is the vehicle in which I can fulfil my ambitions, I can make it happen?
Well, I just think, the time for LTNs has come. It's like, I think 2020 is the year of the LTN. But we've been, as Better Streets, we've been calling for this from the start, from 2015. We were looking across at Waltham Forest and the fantastic results they were getting, much more walking and cycling, much reduced air pollution. And we've been badgering the council since then, since those early days for low traffic neighbourhoods. And so we've given talks at ward forums, residents associations, I've talked to people's kitchens. And thanks to Councillor Vicky Pite, I was invited to talk to the Cabinet in Enfield Council, the whole Labour group. And then finally in 2019, the council decided, so well before COVID, that they would have a policy of low traffic neighbourhoods. And then, of course, we have the current situation where the government is giving emergency active travel funding, and they're very interested in low traffic neighbourhoods. They're asking councils to bid for them because they want to get people walking and cycling. They don't want a car-centred response to COVID. So they're going in everywhere. And as you said, I think there are 96 already in across London, just London, but they're all across the country.
Okay, so let's look at some of the low traffic neighbourhood areas that exist at the moment. And Viola, you are in the Bounds of Bows area where there has been a lot of problems in terms of opposition and so on. Why are you in support of it? What is it about it in your area that's made things, in your opinion, better?
Well, the problem in Bows is obviously that we're right beneath the North Circular, and that's another factor is that the traffic from the North Circular can take shortcuts through our area, and this has created a few massive rat runs, which just makes the whole area worse off. There's more congestion, more pollution. We've had dangerous levels of traffic and pollution, and it's not a good policy, in my view, to keep through traffic inside residential areas. They're supposed to be on the strategic network.
Okay, go on, sorry.
Yes. So far, the council proposed to treat the whole area as a whole, although sadly, due to the restrictions in funding in 2 phases, and so far we've only seen phase 1, which filtered Warwick and the surrounding area, and phase 2 will include Brownlow Road as well. But it's been a major relief that now that it's in. It's so much better for the streets that have been filtered so far, and it just makes the whole area open and quiet and calm, and you don't have to worry when you're on the streets. Because
Okay. Well, let's ask Fiona as well, because Fiona, you're also in the same area, aren't you? And you have views about whether it's benefited your area. And do you want to add anything to what Viola's just said?
Yeah, I'm on the other side of the low traffic neighbourhood from Viola, and we actually live just off a filtered road that would go onto the North Circular, but it's blocked. It's been blocked off for a long time, and so I was always in support of the low traffic neighbourhood, but I didn't really expect to see much difference on our side, so partly because of the. So I didn't expect to see much difference, but when we started noticing the difference is when school started. So I have a 5-year-old who learned to cycle without stabilizers during lockdown. And so because the streets were so quiet, he was cycling up and down the quiet road near us and absolutely loved it. So once we started cycling to school, he wanted to cycle on the roads, and that's not really what we planned. We planned for him to cycle on the pavements, but we thought, well, let's give it a go. And we'll just duck in if cars come. And what we found is that we only had to duck in kind of once, maybe twice, because a car came, and that we'd see cars coming along, but they'd stop at a house or go into a side road, and they weren't the cars that were kind of putting their foot down and just trying to get through the area because they were cutting through and they were rat running. And that makes such a difference. It means that it's totally doable to cycle on the road with a 5-year-old. And it also means that, and like we've seen lots of other families doing it, and even on the filtered road that was filtered before the LTN, we used to have cars zooming down it. And I always suspected that they were probably trying to get onto the North Circular, not realizing it was filtered. And that's totally stopped. So just the way that people are driving in the area and the volume of traffic has totally changed. And just, it feels much, we've got that community feel back that we had during lockdown last time.
Okay, and Jeremy, you also live in a low traffic neighbourhood area, which is the Fox Lane area. I mean, what are the benefits that you've seen there? What makes you think it's a good thing?
Yeah, thank you, Francis. I mean, quite clearly, this has been a big issue over here in Fox Lane in terms of both the speed and the volume of traffic over many years. And people have been making an issue over this for decades. And we've had some roads where there's 42,000 vehicle movements a week. That's the kind of capacity that should be really on main roads. And many of those vehicles have been traveling at speeds in excess of 40 miles an hour as well. overnight, really, what we've now seen is that the roads are calmer. There has been, I would estimate, there must be more than a 90% reduction in both in vehicles, and their speed has dropped as well. Today, I was just out, wandered down to Fox Lane to do some shopping. And there are people walking down Fox Lane, and before that was very daunting for people. The speed and the volume of traffic really wasn't a conducive and pleasant experience. Recently, the change to this environment is a real positive. We've seen also some reporting coming through from St Monica's parents, and they've been really pleased about how the numbers of children who are scooting and walking to school, it's doubled in the last year. Parents are able to say, look, we'll explore other options, and that is down to one of the reasons is because of this the LTN introduced here. It has been a long time coming, and for those people who have lived through this, I'm more of a recent resident, but lots of people are very pleased about it, and you can see people talking in the streets and enjoying this new environment.
Okay, so listening to all of you, you would say, how could anyone oppose it? This is sort of Nevada, this is great, but there is massive opposition. Claire, why do you think there is so much angry and deep opposition?
First of all, I just want to say I've got real sympathy with people who are suddenly confronted with this new situation on our roads. I've got a few friends who are like, what is going on? And we've been looking for this for the last 5 years, and we've been expecting the spike in traffic that we're seeing, which we're confident will settle down, although some of that is COVID related, so that's a different matter. But we were expecting this, but for people who weren't expecting it and suddenly everything has changed, I've got total sympathy with that, the kind of the shock and the disbelief. Why is it being opposed? Why is any major change in society opposed? If you think about anything like votes for women, that was a good thing. Women got the votes, but it was opposed. And I think, anything that challenges the status quo, anything that brings change to society does mostly get opposed. And what low traffic neighbourhoods do is they really change the status quo. Suddenly, where car was king, suddenly cars are guests. Walking and cycling has which is a huge change. But I think, we think there's huge opposition. I'm not sure it's as much as we think it is. I think the people who are very against it, very angry, very upset, are obviously much noisier than the people who are like, oh, this is quite nice. And it was really interesting to see the polls going out. So the most recent one, a YouGov poll, it found across the UK, 57% in favour and 16% against. And it's just, I think supporters tend to be quieter. And again, looking at Waltham Forest, when the work started on their first low traffic neighbourhood, 44% of people opposed it, which is a big percentage. But if you look at it now, if you ask them now, only 1.7% would say take it out. So, it's not as bad as it looks, and people get to love it over time. Okay,
but you talk about the support that you have, and I understand that, and you talk about the fact that in your areas it stops the rat running through the streets in which you live. But many people argue it doesn't stop that, it just displaces traffic. It makes some areas quiet, it makes some areas worse. Brownlow Road right the way back to Coney Lane, Oderman's Hill, where there's tremendous traffic. Jeremy, do you not understand that people feel frustrated because it's not low traffic neighborhoods for all people. It's only low traffic neighborhoods for some people.
Well, indeed, Francis, and I think the first thing is that some of this terminology that's entered into the debate. Rat run is a very divisive term, and I think it is unfortunately leading to that them and us discussion that it seems to be pervading, particularly on social media. Instead, it's drivers, and drivers have become more accustomed to selecting routes that they're more aware of, and a shorter routes that takes them away really from those main roads that were designed to accommodate those higher volumes of traffic. And as it's displacing it has displaced onto the residential roads. So in some ways, what we're seeing is an opportunity to turn that clock back and to reverse that. The Department for Transport data shows that in London, the volume of traffic on residential roads has increased by 72% since 2008. That's largely to do with the introduction of sat navs, etc. as well. So there is when the traffic is on these more minor residential roads, it increases the risk of injuries and even fatalities as well. And I think LTN in essence is helping kind of like reverse that and move that traffic back to the main roads that they were designed and accommodated to accept. I think as Claire talked about earlier, it's about sight lines as well, and about the environment being best for traffic. Now, I think we're in at very early days of this, particularly here in Fox Lane. We're behind where Bowes were, but things aren't going to happen overnight, and the evidence is clear that we need to wait a few months for traffic volumes and people's patterns to settle down. Clearly, for those people within the area, who I speak with, yes, we've already started to change our own behaviours. Outside of that, it will take a bit of time, but evidence does show. There's an academic review that shows 70 road space programs, there is a net reduction, from traffic once they've settled down more. So we've got to give it a bit of time and see how these settle down, and that will take some months.
Yeah, you've got to give it time, you say, and you talk about what people refer to as traffic evaporation, and you hope that will happen. Some people say the trouble is you can't compare one low traffic neighbourhood with another. They're all different, and in some areas it will evaporate, in other areas it won't. And people worry that with LTNs, people are having a one model fits all, and it's too rigid, and that's the problem. I mean, Viola, how do you respond to that?
That's a good question. I don't see an LTN as a model to be. It's more about a principle of how we divide our road network and how we view our streets. So you've got different types of streets that have different types of usage and designs, and if you make infrastructure that's all about through traffic and drive and convenience makes driving the convenient choice, then you will just get more people driving, because that's the easy thing to do. It's faster, it's more direct, it's less of a hassle, which is called induced demand. And induced demand just basically means if you increase capacity, you will get more demand. Whereas if you reduce capacity, people will drive less, because it opens up space to have a different option, a different choice. And so I think traffic evaporation is a confusing word as well. It's not a magical thing that happens overnight. Like Jeremy said, it takes months to settle, and it's based on people's choices. And obviously not every journey has to be made by a car. We know that in Enfield alone, in Enfield Borough, at least 30% of trips are under 2 kilometers, 60% are under 5 kilometers. So they could be cycled or walked or made by public transport.
So, just to reassure people, Viola, in the Bowes area where the traffic on Brownlow Road now goes all the way back to Coney Hatch Lane, how can you reassure people that that traffic will disappear? Where will it go?
All the through traffic will go to the strategic network, but it won't. Brownlow Road will still be a strategic road, but it will just prioritize buses and people on bikes and foot. And I think with the bus gate, it won't be the same as the Warwick camera gate. It will be probably a timed gate, which means only peak times will be filtered, and on other times the road may well be a through route to cars, just to reduce the number of cars. Okay. And that also opens up a whole corridor for cyclists.
Okay.
Which is infrastructure for cycling, which makes more space for cycling.
Okay, well, let's go on to another point that many people have raised, and Claire, you can answer this. I mean, some people on the street say, not just people on the street, some academics, one economist from the Centre of Economics and Business Research in Islington, for example, that LTNs divide people and particularly creates class, divides middle class people who want LTNs, working class people who are stuck on the through routes, because people who are on lower incomes buy houses on those through routes because, like North Circular Road, because they're cheaper. And so what you're doing is you're beginning to set up a new class division through LTNs. Claire.
Yeah, I think that's a complete urban myth. I understand where that thinking is coming from, but I don't think it's true at all. I think what we're talking about is, I think there is a rich-poor divide. I think people, where you really see it is the rich own cars and the poor don't have access to them quite often. So in Enfield, on average, 30% of households don't have access to a car, and yet they're more likely to be affected by everyone else's driving, in terms of road danger, air pollution, and so on. So what we really need to do for social justice is reduce cars. There are too many cars in Enfield. To reduce driving and make it more possible to get around without having access to a car. That's going to be a truly fair society. And the other point is that it's not about whether you live on a main road or in a residential area. There are two ways to make a road healthy, depending what kind of road it is. If you live in a main road, the way to make a main road healthy is to calm the traffic, so narrower roads, 20-mile-per-hour limits. You want more crossings, you want safe space to cycle, you want more trees. That's appropriate for a main road, which is strategic. It's got to carry traffic. But then if you're talking about a neighbourhood, the way to make that neighbourhood healthy is to make it access only by car. If you look at the whole of the Netherlands, Viola will tell you because she grew up there, that's how the streets are arranged. A neighbourhood isn't a through route, it's access only. And if you live on a main road bordering a low traffic neighbourhood, then you have the access to all those quiet streets. Your children can go and play on those streets. You've got a healthy route through to your school or to the shops. So it benefits everyone. So I think we have to stop looking at rich and poor in that way and look at how you treat a major road and how you treat a minor road.
You say it benefits everyone, but those who oppose it sort of, dispute that. They say it only benefits some people. Take pollution levels, and maybe you can answer this, right, Viola. Many people who want LTN say, yes, this is great because it reduces pollution levels. But the 2 points that the people who probably doubt about LTN say, and one is that, there is some research from Sterling that shows that traffic isn't the cause of particulate pollution, it is on some other pollution. And secondly, they're saying that, in the period while traffic is evaporating, if it evaporates at all, people on those roads with the through traffic are suffering huge pollution, and there are kids with asthma there are people who are autistic who are finding their routine change, which really causes them problems. How do you respond to that, Viola?
I can't really comment on the Sterling research because it only looks at one type of pollution, and it did show that nitrogen dioxide did reduce, which is really important. And I think we can all agree that cars are a major source of pollution. But the short answer is we just need to reduce our car use. There are too many cars on the road, and to reduce that, we have to make other options easier and safer. And I think what concerns a lot of people is the idea that they would have to drive longer. Some journeys might be longer because you have to go the way around. That's exactly the point of low traffic neighborhoods, to discourage short journeys, which are easier to replace with another means of transport. And this, again, will take lots of time to settle and for people to new patterns to bed in. But we have to begin somewhere, and we have to try to reduce this.
So, okay, I understand what you're saying. Though obviously some people will say on our areas where we're getting through traffic, we're suffering now and we need some assurance that evaporation will happen. And there's also the concern, isn't there, Jeremy, about emergency access. There's been a lot of concern that ambulances, for example, were not able to get to people quickly enough. And we know there was consultation between the emergency services and the council, but we don't know how good that was, because since then there are a huge number of videos showing ambulances being delayed, and the ambulance service is now monitoring it, and the council has agreed to move some bollards. So obviously they didn't get it right in the first place. I mean, do you see that as a problem, Jeremy? And have you seen the documents of the consultation that did take place between the council and the emergency services?
So firstly, Francis, I'm not privy to the documents, and I think those questions about whether the access and the scheme, how valid it is, are ones for the council and the planners who've designed the scheme to properly answer. I think what is clear is that as you say, the scheme, if you look at what's happened in the correspondence in the last week in the Fox Lane area, is about that change in responding, because this is a trial at the end of the day. This is a trial to understand what works and what doesn't, and issues are being teased out as we go. So therefore we're seeing the introduction and the removal of a bollard and the introduction of a camera point at One Road Conway Road. Yes, we have asked ourselves for correspondence. I myself have had some correspondence from London Fire Brigade that reinforces the point. They support active travel, that they're working closely with Enfield Council. But I think a key point is over this, that the council and the emergency services are talking closely to each other, and we know that because we can see what's been introduced, just in the council's announced in the last few days. So if there are significant issues, then I've confidence that those will come out through the trial and they will get addressed. And I would assume that if the emergency services were so concerned that there was a threat to life and that they weren't able to meet their obligations about response times, then the council would if it was so severe, then the council would have to cancel the whole scheme and take it away. But that's not happened. So it's clear that there is conversations going between all parties. And we need to see what happens. That is the purpose of this trial. Now, elsewhere, if we want to look at what's happened historically, in Waltham Forest, response times for London Fire Brigade, fell after the introduction of the low traffic neighbourhood. So, it's not necessarily going to be the case that and it's certainly not that we're looking at response times and they're being harm to individuals. I think we need to. That's the purpose of the conversations between the authority and those emergency services together.
Okay, but I mean, one of the problems, I think, and this is not your fault, it's not the council's fault, is that money came very quickly that had to be used, and the normal processes of consultation couldn't be gone through. Some people say, well, it shouldn't have happened, and it did. But I mean, do you think that is a real problem, that, money came quickly, local authorities had to react very quickly, and consequently it was done in a piecemeal way, which made the schemes not good, but but very often far from perfect?
Yeah, well, I understand that there is a borough-wide plan, and that this has been on the table for a while, and I think that the council was basically just was ready to jump on this opportunity, and that's possibly the difference between Enfield and Haringey. But yeah, I really don't know the detail of that. I don't know if the other I think Claire might.
So I think the consultation, sorry, the implementation had to go in very quickly, as we know, because that was just a government decision. I think the council, every local authority had about 12 weeks to spend the money, or it would be clawed back, as the government was it. So implementation was rushed, if you like, and there was no time for consultation beforehand. but whether the policy was rushed, the planning was rushed, I'm not so sure, because as Fiona says, this has been looked at well in advance. You know, Bose has been on the council radar for many years. So I don't think the actual plans were rushed. Whether they're perfect or not is another question. And we would love to see feedback resulting in changes if that's what people want. So long as it's still a low traffic neighbourhood and the through traffic is kept out, I think there can be changes to the design. And the council have said they will take feedback on board. So let's see what happens with that.
But there's some sort of evidence, isn't there, Claire, that there has been some rushing, and I don't mean just in Enfield and maybe not in Enfield, but across London, we've got two local authorities who have now abandoned the scheme, one Conservative, one Labour. We've got in another borough, a local authority leader who said he consulted the emergency services, but when the MP wrote to the emergency service, they found out it wasn't very good consultation. So to some extent, you wonder what's happened in Enfield, because we don't know the documentation, we haven't seen it. I mean, why do you think this has happened, that people have withdrawn it? And are you confident that in Enfield everything's gone perfectly?
I'm confident that Enfield have consulted as well as they need to, are consulting. I don't think they've broken any rules. I think it was Ealing that didn't consult emergency services, and that's that's a big fail. That's really unfortunate. But in terms of councils just scrapping schemes, I think there are only two. I think so. In total, 3 LTNs have been scrapped across the whole of London that I'm aware of. With about 96 that have gone in. So a very small percentage have been scrapped. And I think what's missing from the sort of reporting is, the vast majority are going in and are okay, and those councils are holding them up. And I think one reason, so looking at Wandsworth and Redbridge, the ones who pulled their LTNs, I don't think there was anything wrong with their schemes. I think they just lost the political courage. I think they took fright and folded, and I'm really pleased to say I don't think Enfield is going to do that. I think they need to see the results of the consultation. They need to let the trial run its course and then take a decision.
Well, I mean, Viola, some people might actually say they didn't run frightened, but they actually listened to their community. And that leads to the question, when you have a major intervention in a community, how important is it that there is full consultation before a project of this kind that causes so much anger is implemented?
Yeah, I think it's really important that the community are consulted, but there is a consultation happening now, and it's very detailed. So it's asking people where they're going, how they're getting there, what the impact of the filters are. So they're getting a sense of how people are moving, and then the impact of the filters. I think it would have that there was a perception survey before the LTN got put in, and that found that the vast majority, in the 70s and 80% of people, said that they worried about the volume and the speed of traffic. And of course, people don't want their streets having people whiz down them. So I'm not surprised. Basically the council had to respond quickly to this, and they're doing a consultation while it's in, and they're getting the answers that mean that they can improve it and make it worse. We all agree on the problem. The people on the webinar last week, it was great to hear that they are also worried about air pollution, and they're worried about community cohesion. So we all agree on the problem, and we have to find a solution. And it's brilliant that Enfield is taking a bold step to tackle climate change and to tackle all of these issues. And in the process of this trial, they are finding out how to make it work. And I'm sure that there are going to be changes in response to the consultation. And I really hope we can get to a model that does work for the majority.
Well, you're obviously talking about a consultation which is going to take place, after the LTNs have been put in place. But Claire, before they were put in place, even in that short period of time, the deputy leader of the council is the person who has an overview on all this. Did he consult with you at all, or either formally or informally?
Not in the run-up. We didn't get any special treatments in the run-up. You know, I was aware that people in Bose are being consulted. There was that perception survey that went out, and we were really pleased about that. I mean, I'm hoping that a meeting that we had formally with the deputy leader and the leader more than a year ago had an influence on LTNs generally, but that had nothing really to do with this current thing. We've just been saying, you know, we want LTNs, great, here's an opportunity to have LTNs, a bit like a broken record. So I'm sure that's had some influence.
Okay, but the other way of getting consultation and the other way of overlooking at a project is through the council scrutiny process, Jeremy. And some people think in Enfield, the scrutiny process is an absolute shambles. Do you think there's a good enough scrutiny, especially on LTNs?
That's a difficult question to answer, Francis. I think, you know, a lot of it depends on individuals' interpretations of what good is and what adequate is. I suppose, you know, the scrutiny process as formally set out by the council is something that, you know, the council has in its own policies, and, you know, that is that core opportunity for the opposition to scrutinise and call in a plan as appropriate. So if they think that, for example, there hasn't been due process considered within that, I think, you know, where we're at, you know, today, if you look at, you know, how Bose has had to be introduced because of the timing of it, you know, people talk about this was, you know, introduced and just, you know, just launched out. I think it would be fair to say that, you know, communications from the council, you know, wasn't as positive as it could be, but we're now into that process and that trial where people can share their views and make sure that as an individual, their views can be heard. That separate point about policy and with the council, that's set by the authority, and I think, you know, there is that process there. It's got that scrutiny committee, and you know, if people feel it doesn't work, you know, that's something for people to take up with the authorities themselves.
Okay, and Fiona, you were quite positive about the webinar we did last week, and do you feel that the consultation process in the next 6 months is one that can encompass all your views?
All of the local population's views, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, not just one side, but both sides, and come to some sort of you know, compromise settlement.
Yeah, I really hope so. And from what I understand, that there is flexibility, and we're flexible. We're not specific about wanting the filters in a particular place. We want them to that our neighbourhoods to stop being used as kind of for, well, I shouldn't call it rat run, should I? But as through traffic. And again, from what I understand, that there may be changes made in this 6 months. You know, I don't think that they're going to wait. They're going to have to wait until the end of it. They might make changes and then give the scheme a chance to bed in again. But as I said, I have high hopes based on the data from other low traffic neighbourhoods and how people respond to it, given the likelihood of the council responding to concerns. I have high hopes that we're going to come out of the other side of this with a lot of people that actually really love it and they don't want to go back, and people who have adapted their behaviour, and people who feel listened to, and that's what's really crucial. And I think that's where there's a lot of concern here. They don't feel listened to, and I think once all of those things happened, we are going to be in a better place, and we will have quieter neighbourhoods, and we won't have quite so much division in our community, which I really hope we will get to.
Okay, I mean, one of the things about last week's webinar is they didn't want those divisions as well, and you said that, Viola, which is great. And they were keen on a greener environment. They were keen on, you know, calmer streets and better streets. And they said they would be really up to talking to you and come into some sort of arrangement discussion where you could work out some agreement between you. And they would be very, very happy to do that. Claire, would you be happy to do that?
I think, you know, I agree there's lots of common ground, as we've already, you know, talked about, with concerns about what's wrong with our streets. But I think this is a conversation to have at a neighbourhood level. So I think this is one for Fiona or Viola or Jeremy to answer about engaging with people with different views in their communities.
So what do you think, Fiona, if you know, you did that at a neighbourhood level, from what you said, would you be happy with that?
Yeah, I'd really like to have, I mean, having conversations over social media, we all know is a total disaster. And when you get eyeball to eyeball, or at least via a computer screen, people are much more reasonable on both sides. And I would love to get in a room with some people who have concerns and start with what we agree on, and then find a way forward. So rather than arguing the details, let's find, if people don't like the model now, let's find a model that does work, because we all agree on a problem. I think that's absolutely something we can do. And I think it will be really healing for our community.
Okay, and it was the people in the Bowes area last week who were particularly keen on talking and, you know, talking to you. So if you're happy to do that, would you be happy if I tried to facilitate that?
Yeah.
You would?
Yeah,
okay.
I think facilitation would be helpful.
Okay, well, we'll try and do that. Okay, well then, finally, Claire, we've come to the end of the interview, the end of the time. If anyone wanted to find out more about what you're doing and your approach to this, where would they go and who would they make contact with?
So depending on what you're interested in, if you want to talk to either the Bowes or the Fox Lane neighbourhood groups, I'm afraid I haven't updated the website about Fox Lane. There is a Fox Lane email address. But if you go onto our website, betterstreets.co.uk, there's the two groups are there on the top menu. There's an email address for Healthy Streets Bounds Green, which is supporting the Bowes low traffic neighbourhoods. And then if you just email us, so info@betterstreets.co.uk about Fox Lane, we can put you in touch. And then also, if you're just interested in Better Streets generally, or you've want a conversation or debate with us, again, go to info@betterstreets.co.uk. Just bear in mind that we're all volunteers. We're a tiny team really leading Better Streets, and we've all got jobs and families, so we may not get back to you as quickly as we would like. On the slightly different note, if you support what we're trying to do as Better Streets or as any of these LTN groups, we always need more volunteers. And so our Facebook group, that's for supporters, and we've also got, if you don't do Facebook, we do monthly meetings. Yeah, we'd love to have more help. So please join us.
Okay, well, thank you very much for doing that. And, you know, we come to the end of the time now. It always goes
Francis.
Yeah, quickly.
Francis, if I might just make one comment, and apologies for talking over you. You asked Fiona earlier about, you know, that process of engagement with local groups in Bowes. And I think, you know, in Fox Lane area, you know, we've had years of engagement since 2013. We've had plans put forward. We've had trials in this area. We had, you know, planters, you know, and speed hummops put on Fox Lane, and none of those works. But with us, I think, you know, we've had that bringing together the community. We've had Paul Mandel organised a very good and well attended event. We've had the Residents Association also, and a working group around that. I think we've all worked together on making sure that we can bring forward something that we all recognise that change is needed. And through this, I hope that you know, the experience on both sides of the North Circular roads, that we can move towards finding something that works. I think, you know, we've gone so far here on the Fox Lane side. Obviously, we're still listening, we're still wanting to talk to people, and that's the purpose of the consultation as well. And we're really pleased there's something live as well.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I understand that, and Viola says she'd be happy to, you know, discuss with people in Bowes, which is great in that area. And, you know, there is a lot of common ground, and if we can do that, that's great, because I know you've had lots of consultations and meetings, but the anger has gone up, it's not gone down. So it's time to maybe try and, you know, reassess and get people together again. And I'm pleased, Viola, you said that you know what you said. But I'd like to thank you.
And equally here in Fox Lane as well.
And Fox Lane as well, yeah. absolutely, we could, you know, we could do that. I mean, that's great that you've said that as well, Jeremy. Anyhow, I mean, I'd like to thank you for doing it, because you've made your pitch like they did last week. And what, you know, surprises me is the common ground there is between all of you, the desire to have a better environment. And that's the number one start. So I hope we can build from that. And if we can create a cohesive community, and one that lives at peace with each other. Anyhow, thank you for taking part in that, and this interview. And we'll end this interview now.